Airborne forces are military units, usually light infantry, set up to be moved by aircraft and dropped into battle, typically by parachute. Thus, they can be placed behind enemy lines, and have the capability to deploy almost anywhere with little warning. The formations are limited only by the number and size of their aircraft, so given enough capacity, a huge force can appear out of nowhere in minutes, an action referred to as vertical envelopment. Conversely, airborne forces typically lack the supplies and equipment for prolonged combat operations, and are therefore more suited for airhead operations than for long-term occupation. Furthermore, parachute operations are particularly sensitive to adverse weather conditions. Advances in helicopter technology since World War II have brought increased flexibility to the scope of airborne operations, and air assaults have largely replaced large-scale parachute operations and completely replaced combat glider operations. General information. Airborne forces can be divided into three categories: paratroopers landed by parachute from aircraft, air landing troops landed by aircraft, air assault troops or airmobile infantry transported to the battle by helicopter or by aircraft. The basic premise of airborne forces is that they can arrive with such speed that a coherent defense cannot be mounted quickly. It is assumed that this tactical advantage cannot be sustained for very long, so paratroopers must either use the supplies of the enemy, be continuously resupplied by air, or wait to be relieved by ground troops. Though airborne troops are usually defenseless in transit, the sudden appearance can surprise or shock defending forces for a short time. Airborne forces are generally composed of infantry and light, non-armored vehicles and guns. In World War II, light motorcycles were used by paratroopers, the American Cushman Model 53 and the British Welbike. After the Korean War, vehicles light enough to be dropped by parachute were developed, such as the M551 Sheridan tank. The Soviets developed the -1 Bermudian dollars and -3 Bermudian dollars fighting vehicles. Helicopters can transport light armored vehicles such as the German Weasel AWC, LAV-25 and British CVR series. Large transports can carry only small numbers of main battle tanks or heavier infantry fighting vehicles. Early history. The idea of sky soldiers is by no means a recent thought. Benjamin Franklin envisioned a time when soldiers would be delivered from the sky, with a crude, rudimentary understanding of parachutes, whereas the prince who can afford so to cover his country with troops for its defense, so that 10,000 men descending from the clouds might not, in many places, do an infinite deal of mischief before a force could be brought together to repel them. Benjamin Franklin, 1784. Although Winston Churchill had proposed the creation of an airborne force to assault behind the German lines in 1917 during the First World War, the first modern operation dates to late 1918. Major Lewis H. Brereton and his superior Brigadier General Billy Mitchell suggested dropping elements of the U.S. 1st Division behind German lines near Metz. The operation was planned for February 1919, but the war ended before such an attack could be seriously planned. Mitchell conceived that U.S. troops could be rapidly trained to utilize parachutes and drop from converted bombers to land behind Metz in synchronization with a planned infantry offensive. Following the war, the United States Army Air Service experimented with the concept of having troops carried on the wings of aircraft pulled off by the opening of the parachutes. The first true paratroop drop was by Italy in November 1927. Within a few years, several battalions had been raised and were eventually formed into two Folgore and Nembo divisions. Although these would later fight with distinction in World War II, the divisions were never used in a parachute drop. Men drawn from the Italian parachute forces were dropped in a special forces operation in North Africa in 1943 in an attempt to destroy parked aircraft of the United States Army Air Forces. In Peru on March 27, 1927, Enrique Taverny Entelador from Avro aircraft, piloted by Captain Clifford, from a height of 2,000 meters, made a leap in Las Palmas, becoming the first Peruvian paratrooper. Subsequently, on May 10, 1928, Second Lieutenant C.E. Acute Sayar Alvarez War Palmas Las voluntarily jumped from a height of 3,000 meters, becoming the first military parachutist. Then on May 16, 1928, Major Fernando Melgar Condon Sergeant 1st, José Pineda Castro, jumped from the famous Las Palmas at altitudes of 2,000 and 4,300 meters, respectively. On the 24th of May of that year, Ensign Peter Griever, the seaplane service from Ancon, jumped from a height of 2,000 meters, as part of events to celebrate the Day of the Air Force Base in Chiclayo, and after being summoned by Colonel Cesar Alvarez Guerra-Cap and have completed rigorous training, on the 23rd of September 1940, jumped massively from Caproni, California. 111 Panchos, the following: Captain David Rock, Ensign Jose Luis Quinones and NCOs Alfarano, Oscar Alamo, Antonio Brandares, Ricardo Colmenares, Nestor and Carlos Raffo Madalengoisha. At about the same time, the Soviet Union was also experimenting with the idea, planning to drop entire units complete with vehicles and light tanks, to help train enough experienced jumpers. Parachute clubs were organized with the aim of transferring into the armed forces if needed. Planning progressed to the point that corps-size drops were demonstrated to foreign observers, including the British military attaché Archibald Wavell, in the Kiev military district maneuvers of 1935. One of the observing parties, Germany, was particularly interested. In 1936, Major F. W. Emmons was ordered to set up a parachute school at Stendal, and was allocated a number of Junkers Ju-52 aircraft to train on. The military had already purchased large numbers of Junkers Ju-52 aircraft which were slightly modified for use as paratroop transports in addition to their other duties. The first training class was known as Ausbildungskommando Emmons. They commenced the first course on May 3, 1936. Other nations, including Argentina, Peru, Japan, France and Poland, also organized airborne units around this time. France became the first nation to organize women in an airborne unit, recruiting 200 nurses who during peacetime would parachute into natural disasters, but also reservists who would be a uniformed medical unit during wartime.